Hi, this is Ryan with Tilt 5, and today we have something special. We are actually releasing the beta plugin SDK for Unreal Engine 427, and that comes along with a bunch of new tutorial videos that are coming out, including this one. So to get started, we're going to go through the basic Tilt 5 setup, which starts at the tilt5.com webpage. So navigate over here, click on the Developers tab, and scroll down just a little bit to get started. And this will have the two main components that you need to download. One of them is the driver that you need just to run Tilt 5, regardless of the engine. You'll already need this to play content as well. And then we've just added a new hyperlink for the download the Unreal SDK beta. So click on this and you will download the zip folder that we're going to go to that we can put into the engine so that we can run this with Unreal. So once those two things are downloaded, we're going to go and pop over here. So the setup installation for the drivers is pretty self-explanatory. We just go and click through the installation. We've got the Tilt 5 control panel. This has information about your game board, your glasses, and your wand. So after we've got that going, we're going to go and install the engine plugin for Unreal. So go back to where we downloaded it, find the zip folder, unzip that real quick. Now, in order to install it in the right engine version, I mentioned 4.27. We are also supporting 4.26 and 4.25 with our plugin. So choose the engine that you want to use. I'm going to do 4.27 on this one. Go in here and the Tilt 5 folder, we're going to right click and we're going to copy it. You can do this just as easily with dragging. So then we've got to navigate to our engine install directory. For me, this is in my PC operating system C drive, program files, Epic Games. You can put these engines anywhere you want when you install them. So if you have it somewhere else, you've got to find your location. But by default, it sends it to Epic Games. Once you're here, you choose the engine that you have installed that you want to copy this plugin to. We've picked 4.27, so I'm going to go into 4.27. And then from here, we go to engine. And then here we've got plugins. So click on plugins. And now in this plugins folder, I am just going to go right click, click paste, and replace because I've already got one. And now we've got the Tilt 5 plugin folder installed into the engine. Another place you could put it is in the Marketplace folder. That's where all of your Marketplace plugins download, and that's where it will end up when the plugins are on the Marketplace. But for now, it can just be its own folder. So from here, the next step is to open up Unreal 4.27 and create a new project. So we're going to be creating a brand new project. This will be the tried and true third-person template project, which has a lot of components, including an actor that you possess, a camera that you can move, and input already wired up. So this is a nice little shortcut to getting a game going. We go to Games and choose here. We've got third person. Click Next. This will give us settings that we can use the defaults, and I'm just going to call this T5 Demo. All right, Tilt 5 Demo. And here we have the Tilt 5 demo project we just created. So this is the Unreal 4.27 engine. It looks a little bit different from the 5.0. So in case you are unfamiliar with things like how to turn on this shelf, there's a little button just to the left of filters that toggles on and off your content folders. Super, super useful. I always turn this on and just leave it on. Secondly, the view options is down here. This is where they hide a couple of important things like the engine content and the plugin content. This can give you too many folders, so maybe you can turn it on and off as you choose. But turning on show engine content and show plugin content allows you to have access to my favorite folder, which is the Tilt 5 content folder. We're going to be using some stuff from there later, but for now, I just want to show how you actually get to these folders. And one thing that we want to do before we even get started is we're going to validate that we've actually installed the plugin. So we go here, the top, we go to Edit, Plugins, and there's a lot, so I just sort by Tilt 5. We're going to be doing that a lot. And boom, we've got the Tilt 5 plugin. This has already been enabled on my end. If it was off, then you hit the checkbox, and then you restart the engine. When the engine restarts, you will have the Tilt 5 plugin ready to go. So I've already got that, which means that I have a Tilt 5 installed in this project. I've got my driver running in the background, and so I have a Tilt 5 capable game. This game, if I just press play, is the normal third-person template. So you can use WASD, mouse look, you can jump using the spacebar. Nothing particularly special until we go to the drop-down here and go to VR Preview. So this is where Tilt 5 takes over. And if we hit VR Preview, and I look at my board with my glasses, you see a lot of gray, and you also can look up and see the character. Now, I actually can't see the character. I can only see gray because they're actually clipping off of the edge of the board. This is because we've got a camera offset and we've got some scale issues. Those are the first things that we are going to fix. And we do that by changing my very favorite setting called World to Meters. World to Meters is in your world settings, which if you don't have open, you can go to Window, and this is how you find world settings. So open that up, put that over here. Now you've got a couple of things like with your game mode overrides. This is really, really useful stuff. So you want your world settings available. But for us, we're just going to type world to meters. And behold, we have one of the coolest settings that came out of VR is the ability to change all of the scale of your content simply by changing this one value. It doesn't just change, well, it doesn't actually scale anything up. It just changes you as the player, and for stereoscopic displays, it changes the distance between your eyes so that everything either looks a lot bigger or looks a lot smaller. So right now, this is at 1:1 scale. The problem is our Tilt 5 board is only 70 centimeters across, and so this character is too big. If we wanted it to be even bigger, we could lower this value. So if you take, it's normally 100. If you turn it down to 10, this is kind of fun as a VR trick. Now you would be miniature size, maybe the size of a mouse, and you would look up and everything would tower above you. It looks really cool if you haven't tried it. But we actually want to shrink everything down so that it fits nicely on our little tabletop board. That means increasing this value, not to 100, but in this case, I like to go to 1,000. Or even 2,000. There's a lot of values in here that you're going to want to tweak, but 1,000 works pretty well for this exact project. So we've changed the world to meters to 1,000. Now, the immediate result is that Tilt 5 is good to go. I am looking down at the third-person character, and they are about diorama size. The world is shrunk down as well. I'm kind of towering over it. I am a little bit too far back from the character. That's that camera offset that I mentioned before, which we're going to zero out soon. But just know that all we've done is install the plugins, change the world to meters, and this is what you get immediately out of the box. So we even have input. If I reach over and use my keyboard, it has all of the original key inputs. If you had a Xbox controller gamepad plugged in, you could also just use that immediately, and you'd have a Tilt 5 base game ready to go. The headset itself is doing its thing. So we have a couple more changes that I want to make, and that takes us into how to edit the camera in Tilt 5. So the third-person character, if you click on it in the scene, you can go down here to the right, go Edit Third-Person Character. This launches the Blueprint Editor, and this is the viewport and the event graph. This is where all the stuff resides. In this case, let me dock it up to the top. This is sort of how I like to work. You can do it your own way. Now we've got the third-person character open, and you can see that they've got a camera attached, and the camera is lagging behind them. That's what's causing that additional offset that I mentioned. So if you look here under the capsule component, which is the character itself, there is a child, which is the camera boom, and then underneath that is the follow camera. So it can be tempting to mess with the camera itself. If you wanted to move this camera around, you could try, but you don't actually get movement directly related to this camera. You get movement based on the camera's parent. But for now, just know that we need to change the offset of this camera to make it a little bit closer to where we want it. Otherwise, this distance is kind of going to mess with us. In this case, it's under a camera boom arm. I like these. They allow some really cool tricks like lazy follow. So instead of deleting it or unparenting it, I'm just going to leave it here, and we're going to take the target arm length of this camera, and I'm just going to zero it out. So this will make it so that instead of being just artificially offset from the character, that we're pretty much, our origin is right where the character is, and then our head does the offset. The main offset that you're going to want to learn is wherever this location is going to be the board center, and then wherever your head is how far your head is away from the center of the board. And fortunately, that scales with world to meters, so you don't have to do some crazy extra math in order to make you be able to move around when things are big or things are small. So that's the most basics I can do on the camera. We're going to do a deep dive in a future video, but this, just knowing that the camera has a parent and that is going to be its origin point, is going to save you a lot of trouble in the future. Trust me. In fact, because there are some things that we want to do to the camera, including the ability to lock it in place, the ability to move it with buttons, or the ability to rotate our entire view, I am going to go ahead and create an additional parent to this camera boom. It's just going to be a basic scene component, and so I'm going to add a component here. I'm going to look down here and grab a scene, and now I'm going to rename it AR root. This is what we're calling the actual center of the board position. So in this case, I think I may have accidentally put it under the camera boom. Let's make sure that it's under the capsule component, and then I'm going to take the camera boom itself, drag it, and parent it underneath this AR root. So the AR root, let's see, we want it to be zeroed out. Make sure you didn't accidentally get any transforms. This is zeroed. This is zeroed. Okay, so we have a nice clean camera that is ready to go. If you ever want to be closer to your character, you can take this AR root or the camera boom and you can move it down. So I'm just going to even move it like into the floor and take a look. So head is the same height, and the character is the same height, but now we are a lot closer to it. That's one of the ways that you might immediately want to edit the camera, just by moving it around under this AR root. Moving the camera itself doesn't do a lot because of the way that we actually inherit from its parents instead of the camera. But we'll do a whole video on that. So moving this back to where it was, this is almost a game, and it's almost playable, but it needs input. So we can either go and add the Tilt 5 wand input directly here, or we can do it as part of this input manager system itself. So I'm going to show real quick how you would add it directly to a blueprint. So let's go, and we're going to right click onto the canvas. We're going to type tilt, which gives us all the Tilt 5 stuff, and we are going to see the Tilt 5 wand with an L and an R next to it. This is super important. The default controller is the Tilt 5 right wand, or the R wand. If alphabetically it gives you all of the L stuff, you might end up being annoyed because it's not going to fire off the events that you want. So always look for the right wand unless you are needing the left one, or for example, using both wands. So for this case, we're going to take the jump action and we're going to replace it with the Tilt 5 wand trigger. So as I mentioned, Tilt 5 wand right, and then Tilt 5 wand trigger. The difference between the trigger and the trigger axis is that the trigger is just a Boolean event. It fires off one time. The trigger axis is a float that reports a value based on how much you're squeezing the trigger. That can be super useful, but in our case, we just want to jump when we pull the trigger. So now we've got something that looks exactly like this jump. If you hold the Alt button while clicking onto any of these little arrows, you can disconnect their existing lines. And I'm just going to pull this off here and take the pressed, drag that from this arrow, and take released, drag it off here. Now the Tilt 5 wand trigger is activating the jump portions of this script. We could have left the input action here so that you can double wire. This would mean that anything that is firing off jump, like the space bar, for example, is still going to do it. But for cleanliness, I usually like to disconnect the unused ones. We hit compile, we hit save, and just to show that this worked, I'm going to press play. And there's our little character. I can't move it yet using the wand joystick, but I can pull the trigger and make him jump. So that is how we put an input event directly into a blueprint. But honestly, my favorite way is to use the input mapping system inside of the project settings. So if we go to Edit Project Settings, scroll down a little bit, it's kind of hard to see, and we've got Input. And then inside of this, hey, look, there's nothing here except, look, there's a tiny little caret next to Action Mappings and Axis Mappings. We're going to expand both of them. Here we have the jump action that I mentioned just now. So this jump is currently wired to the spacebar, face button, Vive button trigger, Oculus Go trigger, all of these different input mappings. So if we wanted to use this method for putting the Tilt 5 wand trigger in here, all we would do is go to click this plus button, and then we would put the Tilt 5 right trigger into this list. You could clean out the list if you're not using the rest of these too. But since we already put that direct, we're actually going to skip that one, and instead we're going to do the axis mappings. So axis mappings are the joystick input. It's the analog signal, so it goes between 0 and +1 and -1, depending on how far you're pushing the thumbstick. And since we have one of those analog thumbsticks, we want to wire in our axis over here. So move forward is collapsed. We're going to extend move forward and see that W, all of these mixed reality ones, and a bunch of trackpads and thumbsticks, usually in the Y-axis, are wired up to move forward. So it just so happens that Tilt 5 uses the same wand axis. So here I'm going to go press plus over here, and now there's a new one at the bottom. You can miss it if you're not paying attention. I've missed it before. There's now a new axis mapping called none at the bottom. If you open this up, type in tilt, you will find all of the Tilt 5 different input maps. So in this case, we mentioned Y-axis, so we are looking for the stick Y-axis, and we are looking for the right wand. Look, Tilt 5 wand, right stick Y-axis. That's the up and down. Since we're doing move forward, I just click it, and now with the same normal 1 value, we've mapped the Tilt 5 wand stick Y. And we're going to do the exact same thing to the move right. Here you can see it's A and D, and it's the X value of a bunch of these. And we've got the same thing, so click the plus button, find the none down here, type in tilt, looking for the right stick, X-axis, and leave it at 1. So boom, we now have the input mapped to our joystick. So we're going to go back to our third person character blueprint, and we've already wired up the trigger here. I actually wanted to show this before. The right side of this blueprint is where we've got movement. So this is what we just wired up with the input axis move forward and input axis move right. It spits out a float value, which it uses to scale the movement using the movement component. And since we wired this up in the input manager, we don't need to directly bring in the tilt 5 axis here. But if we were to do that, it would look like this. Tilt 5, wand R, stick, no, alphabetical, stick y-axis. It looks just like the input axis move forward. So if you wanted to wire anything directly, you can do that inside your blueprints without using the input manager. Just wanted to show that. So the next thing we're going to do is set up the motion controller for the Tilt 5 wand. This is as simple as adding a motion controller component. And to do that, we're going to go over to our hierarchy in our character. So we're going to go into the camera boom, and we're going to add a component, which we're just going to type out Tilt 5, and that gives us the Tilt 5 wand controller. So boom, we've now got a wand controller in the project. But before it can work, we always have to go and scroll down onto its details, and the motion source defaults to left because of the alphabet, but we need to switch that to the right. So go and choose it right hand instead of left, and now the motion source should be good. But it doesn't have anything visible, so you won't be able to see it. So we're going to go and add the mesh of the wand to this. So here we're going to click on the wand controller. We need the mesh to be parented under that. So add component, and we're going to type in static for static mesh. Now we've got a static mesh. We can name it wand and go into its details. On the right side, static mesh, if we choose the wand, I'll just type it in here, and we've got a wand. So hit compile, save it, and we can check it in the viewport. Here we've got the wand. It's at 000, and so when we run the game, as you can see, I can move the character around, I can jump, and I have my wand component, which is a 6 degree of freedom controller that looks exactly like the same location that your real wand is in, so it can cast shadows on the board, it can interact with components. If you put physics on it, it can knock things around and be really fun. Which does remind me that one of the most important things that you might want to do is go to your wand mesh, and if you don't want it to mess with things, I like to turn off its collision by default, because right now it blocks all dynamics, and that's just the mesh itself. So by turning off its collision, we can then make sure that when we want it to collide or overlap with things, we can add it in later. Otherwise, because this sometimes spawns at the origin, it might knock things around if it has collision. That's something funny that happens. So there you have it. This is a Tilt 5 project that we started from scratch after installing the drivers and the SDK plugin. We created a camera. Well, we edited a camera. We changed the world to meters so that everything is the proper scale. And we added input in a variety of ways, including the wand component. So now you have a third-person project that's ready to go. You can swap out meshes, add whatever you want. We're going to make more of these videos that'll show a couple of different ways that you can make projects, usually using the Unreal starter content, and that'll get you going. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for future videos.